The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Saving and investing can be confusing and overwhelming. We're here to break through the noise, misinformation, and confusion with easy-to-understand concepts and tools that you can put into practice right away. Whether you're a novice investor or an old pro, join Jason as he explores different topics on investing and personal finance. From 401ks to better budgeting decisions, we'll cover it all. Our investment guidance will give you the comfort and security of knowing that you're on track to achieve your goals. It's time to rise above all of the distractions of daily life and take control of your financial future. Welcome to Financially Fit with your host, Jason Haviland.
Hello, and welcome to Financially Fit with Jason Haviland. I'm your host, Jason Haviland, and today we're going to talk solar energy. And I'm very grateful to be joined today by Dan Weeks, co-owner of Revision Energy. So thank you, Dan, for being with us today. Great to be here. Solar is a topic that's on a lot of people's minds. A lot of people have been evaluating, is it time for me to do solar? What do the economics look like? And today we're going to get into those topics. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right in with our conversation today with Dan. So Dan, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So first, let's talk about your personal journey and how did you get involved with solar? What led you down the path to being interested in this topic?
Well, I got started at a time when the economics weren't very good. Back in the 1990s, people weren't really putting solar on their roofs because it was prohibitively expensive for most people. But I was a high school student here in New Hampshire, out in the Monadnock area at Conval High School, and we had a Monadnock solar race car team.
Oh, that's great.
A bunch of high school kids were a part of. I wasn't the tech genius. I built the website and helped out with the car however I could, but we had a nifty little car powered entirely by the sun, a modest battery on board. It could go about 70 miles an hour, so respectable, not quite a Formula One there. But
that's still pretty fast for a little solar car.
For a nothing but sun, it was pretty cool. We'd race against the likes of MIT and other fancy teams, and it was a great way to realize practically that there's this tremendous resource. The sun feeds the plants, feeds the animals, feeds us all. We wouldn't be here without it, obviously, but we hadn't really thought much. Some folks had been at the pioneering edge for decades, harnessing the sun for electricity, but it wasn't mainstream by any means. But I got to see as a high school kid just how powerful it could be and how it would eventually transform our lives from transportation to electricity for our homes and buildings and all the rest. But I didn't really imagine in the 1990s that I would someday be able to power my home, heat and cool my home, power my car with solar. And yet, thanks to amazing technological breakthroughs, which have brought the cost of basic solar cells, the photovoltaic technology, down, about 75% in the last decade, and much more if you go back to the 1990s, the economics actually work. And ordinary folks
are getting better than they had been every year,
a whole lot better, year by year.
That's great. All right, so we'll get into that, but I do want to talk a little bit about one really interesting project that Revision has sort of worked on lately, and that's the solar panels at the Nashua Soup Kitchen and Shelter. Just tell us a little bit about that project. That's, I live here in Nashua, so I love seeing collaborative projects like that. Just tell us a little bit about that project.
Well, this has been one of the funnest projects for me to work on, also as a Nashua guy, a longtime volunteer at the Soup Kitchen, to see this organization that's really at the heart of our community, provides thousands of meals every week to folks in need. I was there this morning serving breakfast and a couple hundred meals getting served, and it's a wonderful institution and one which happens to spend many thousands of dollars a year on electricity. Keep those freezers cold, those ovens hot. About $20,000 a year is their electric bill. And so we started talking, the executive director, Michael Reinke, and I, over a beer last year, how could we, they'd already taken some great steps when they rehabbed the old building that's now their facility on 2 Quincy Street. They had done a really good job of creating a tight envelope, really efficient building. That's where anybody should start.
Right.
You know, don't burn extra kilowatt hours you don't need.
have
If we're going to
Right.
install your solar, let's reduce your demand first so we don't need to install extra and save as much as we can that way. And they'd done a great job at that a couple of years ago when they renovated that building. But we wondered, you know, is there a way that we could use this resource, sunlight, which shines down on their roof most days of the year, to offset a chunk of their electric load? My company, Revision Energy, is a certified B Corp, a benefit corporation. We can get more into that later if you want. But a big part of our mission as a triple bottom line benefit corporation is helping nonprofits like the Soup Kitchen that wouldn't otherwise be able to access solar, for the main reason that there are tax incentives available to businesses or individuals that file federal income taxes that just aren't available to nonprofits. So how could we help them access solar to save a whole lot of money long term? And what we did was work through and set up a power purchase agreement by which the solar that's installed on their roof, 131 panels, about 40 kilowatts.
Big installation.
The panels are actually owned by my company.
Okay.
We don't charge them any cost of capital. We just install them and own them for 6 years. In that time, we can access the tax incentives, and then we can pass those savings on to the nonprofit. And then come day one of year 7, they'll be able to buy that out at a steep discount off of what it costs to install. And from that moment forward, they will have free electricity, over 40,000 kilowatt hours of free electricity a year. In the meantime, they're purchasing the electricity that's generated on their roof for a discount, less than what they
get a little bit.
pay to the utility. So the total savings there are in the 6 figures, approaching 200,000 by our best estimates. And it's something that, again, any nonprofit that has a lot of sun on its roof, preferably south-facing, but east and west works too, or a flat roof, they can access this resource and save a lot of money to advance their mission.
That's great, and it's great that Revision Energy was willing to work with them so collaboratively, because not a lot of nonprofits can always figure out the financing and figure out how to pay for some things up front, and it's better to pay some things ongoing, so it's great that you guys were able to work that out. All right, now let's jump into a little bit about the economics on solar. We mentioned a little bit about the price coming down. We'll get a little bit more into that, but I always feel like a conversation about solar should always start, we don't want to get too wonky and too academic with the discussion, but the concept of an externality, right? A concept of there is a cost beyond just the cost that you pay for things. And when you pay for something like a gallon of gas, you don't always, you factor in what it costs to make that gas, to ship it, to get it into, to refine it, to get it to your pump where you can use it. But you don't necessarily have to pay for the pollution that it causes, right? Another example I like to use is littering, right? A lot of times, the easiest thing for somebody to do is just throw something on the ground, and you don't have to worry about sort of how it gets picked up or what happens to it. It is a little bit more effort to pack it with you if you're on a hike or find a trash can somewhere. And those costs have to be borne by someone, right? Similarly for energy, when it's not, when you're polluting in the energy, like all that, something happens to that pollution. And that, that cost and figuring that out, it can be really hard to figure out what that is and make judgments about that. But that's one thing in my mind that has historically been missing from the conversation in solar and other clean energies. So maybe just talk real briefly. Do you sort of see that same paradigm as you look at energy, and has that become, communicating that point? Is that something that we're doing a good job of communicating, or something we have to get better at?
You bring up a really important point about externalities, negative externalities in the case of our energy system, which is 85% fossil fuels or non-renewable sources like nuclear. I should say right off the bat that in a head-to-head competition between subsidized fossil fuels and clean energy, solar and wind are actually cheaper, not counting any of those externalities, which in the case of
today. So that's today. All right. Now that has not been the case historically.
Not historically, but as of 2017, with continuing technological breakthroughs, solar and wind have become officially the cheapest form of energy on Earth. Obviously, your conditions vary. Some places it's cheaper, others it's more expensive. You're not going to get a lot in the North Pole in the middle of winter, but you get my drift. So under the current economics, where we do a pretty poor job of factoring in the negative externalities associated with fossil fuels, it still makes financial sense to go with solar or wind if you have a larger application. And we can get more into what those specific economics are. But I think it's so important that we have a conversation about the externalities.
Right.
Now, the Center for Investigative Reporting Journalism did a study of what it actually costs to burn a gallon of gas.
Yeah.
You know, my wife drives the Prius. I was filling it up last night. I get to drive an electric car, so it's charged by the sun, which is nice. But I was filling up her car last night in Nashua, and it was about $2.54 a gallon. The actual price per gallon of gas, according to this research, is about $15 a gallon.
Right. There's a huge gap there, right?
A tremendous gap. And if they were charging me $15 at the pump, I wouldn't buy it.
We'd all be walking.
We'd all be walking, riding our bikes,
Right,
driving electric cars,
Right.
powered by solar, et cetera. And that is because, you know, just one statistic here, in New Hampshire, the health effects of our carbon pollution as a state. We're not a big place, but still there's a lot of cars on the road. The health effects are estimated 100 lives lost a year, $1.6 billion in public health expenditures. That's one price we pay. Never mind the sort of broader, more diffuse economic costs. So winters are a whole lot warmer than they used to be. Flooding is a whole lot more extreme than it used to be. All things that have been predicted as results of our burning fossil fuels to the extent that we do. Warming winters mean our maple sugaring industry is losing a lot of ground. Most of the production is now in Canada. It means ski resorts. A whole lot of the small ski mountains, the ones that I grew up skiing on, like Temple Mountain, are closed. So there's all sorts of ripple effects that we have a hard time counting. And until our political leaders take the step of acknowledging that there is a price to burning carbon, by putting a price on carbon, which will vastly change the incentives between clean energy, will become much cheaper even than it is today. Yep. Polluting fossil fuels will become more expensive because they actually are more expensive. We'll just build that price into the consumption of it. At that point, I think we'll see a real tipping point in rapidly scaling clean technologies. But we're already seeing significant ramp up of solar and other clean technologies because the economics work already today.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that, because out of sort of the textbook externality land, sort of here in Nashua, right? We can't just we're not just choosing between, okay, here's my provider for solar and here's what they charge. Here's my provider for natural gas. Here's what they charge. Or here's what I can, if I'm using oil to fill my tank, like, right? It's a little more nuanced than that, right? So let's talk about the installation or use of solar energy. The two main tracks, sort of as I understand them, is buy or lease / rent, right? So some sort of outright purchase or some sort of leasing arrangement where, like, similar to what you've done with the Nashua Soup Kitchen and Shelter, there's some sort of leasing arrangement where some other entity still owns them, they lease them to you, and then either over some period of time, somehow the ownership arrangement may change. Which of those two do you see as sort of the path, the next most logical path for somebody to explore, and sort of what some of those challenges may be in trying to get that, how can I here on the ground actually get that low price for solar energy? Because I can't just call up, Nashua Solar and say, hey, switch me over.
So hands down, the choice is ownership.
Okay.
We don't lease systems to homeowners, to businesses, and what I described with the Nashua Soup Kitchen is a temporary power purchase agreement where the end goal will be, out of the 40-year life of the system, 33 plus years, it will be owned by the soup kitchen so they can generate free power of their own. When you lease
but leasing is an avenue that many companies are promoting.
With all due respect, I think it hasn't really caught on very well here, more so in other parts of the country, because when people really dig into the economics, in fact, when my wife and I were looking to get solar on our roof a couple years ago, we looked at the leasing option, we went with the purchase option, because when you're generating your own electricity, instead of paying a slightly lower rate, you're getting free electricity.
Right.
And the economics are much, much better that way.
Okay.
But a lot of folks don't have 10, 15 grand lying around to invest in the upfront cost of a solar array on their roof. So what most of our customers do is they take out a solar loan.
Okay.
A couple percent, 4 or 5% interest, pretty reasonable. And what they're able to do in that scenario is basically swap their old electric bill for a monthly loan payment. Because since they're generating free electricity, they're not paying the utility except a $12, roughly $12.60 customer charge each month. That's for the
What's that for? That sounds like something that,
Good question.
They got stuck into some bill somewhere to, hey, because we should just charge them anyway.
Well, in fact, I would say our friends at Eversource earn that money.
Okay.
Because what happens today, 99 out of 100 solar electric systems that we connect are connected to the grid.
Right.
Because sun doesn't shine at night or on rainy days, you still need to pull down those kilowatt hours to power your home.
Yep.
And so effectively what happens is the grid operates as your backup battery.
Okay.
On bright, sunny summer days, we're producing 2, 3, 4 times what we're using in my house. And in real time, those electrons are flowing out over the wires and they're powering our neighbors' homes.
Okay.
That night, on rainy days, in winter, when we're using more than we're producing, we're able to retrieve, in a sense, those kilowatt hours that we exported to the grid, and we can use them up at a different time. It's called net metering.
Okay.
And the utility maintains the poles and wires. The electricity that we export is considered high-value electricity because the times that we're producing correspond to the moments of peak demand when electricity is most valuable.
Yep.
So hot summer afternoons and evenings when everybody's got the AC cranking.
Yep.
And so in that sense, it's a good trade that occurs. We provide high-value electricity to our neighbors, the neighborhood. We take back and pay for through those kilowatt hours that we produced when the sun isn't out.
All right, so they take care of sort of figuring out sort of how to handle the excess, right? Because typically, we were talking a little bit about this earlier, typically you're not going to put a big battery in your backyard to store all that extra energy. Potentially you could, right? Some installations might, but in this case, Eversource, real nice utility for them to, all right, they'll take the extra, they'll figure out how to distribute it to our neighbors. We'll also do the accounting of all that. How much did you use? How much extra did you produce? And then sort of net it all out for us.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
That's
And the battery system that you mentioned, those are real. We install a lot of battery systems, usually as a backup.
Okay.
So when the power goes out, instead of burning a diesel generator or losing power for hours or even days, people can revert right to their battery system, high-tech lithium-ion batteries. And the beauty of that is, especially if you live out in the country, my mom is in Temple where I grew up. In the ice storm a couple of years ago, she was out for 10 days.
Yep.
You can continue to recharge that battery through the solar on your roof.
Right.
So you can keep going indefinitely while the sun is shining, recharging, discharging as you need it in your home. And we'll see that.
Do people do like hybrid solutions like that, where you might not need a battery to do like the whole house, but maybe like, if I had one that could power a couple things if the power goes out, that might be
a
appealing.
lot of folks will go with a more modest-sized battery, less expense up front. It covers their essential loads during an outage. Some people want to stack multiple batteries and can run the whole house for a longer period of time.
Now, I've heard some is the ability for the power companies to do net metering, is that legislated at the state level? Are they required to do that, and does it vary by state?
It is a state-level regulation. We have our New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission. Other states have similar commissions. In New Hampshire, we've been, frankly, a bit behind the curve here. Massachusetts has about 7% of their electricity generation comes from solar. We're at about 0.4%, less than half of 1%.
We always lose to Massachusetts.
I hate to say it, but Vermont is even further along at about 8.5%. And that's because the Public Utilities Commission in those states, together with the legislature and the governor, has been much more proactive. For one, they've been a little bit more cognizant of the cost that they're paying, that all taxpayers are paying because of continued reliance on fossil fuels. So they've built those prices in. And they've put a higher value on solar electricity that's exported. And they've set higher goals for where the state should be through what's called the Renewable Portfolio Standard. In New Hampshire, we're still very modest, half of 1%, but the rate of change is very encouraging. Literally thousands of Granite Staters every year are looking to convert over. if for no other reason than to save money.
Right.
You know, we save over $1,000 a year at my home that we used to pay the utility because we've got those 17 panels on our roof.
Right. And so why in your mind don't those economics work for leasing? Is it because you miss out on subsidies? Is it because maybe something about the net metering doesn't work? So what is it about the leasing of the panel where you'd say, all right, I'll just lease it and then just pay basically pay them to get a lower rate?
So the incentives are a big part of it. For anybody who purchases a solar electric system, they can take 30% off the cost of the investment through the ITC, the investment tax credit.
Yeah.
If it's a business, they can take that plus the accelerated depreciation of the asset, which they can for all sorts of capital investments.
Yep.
So that takes
another
a chunk
show
off.
of Section 125 depreciation. We'll do that another day, but that's an option for small
Important
business.
topics
Yes,
for,
we'll do
for
that
any
one,
business leaders out there for sure. The bottom line is that if you're a business and you've got a sunny roof, it is an excellent value proposition. You know, I've been working with some businesses in southern New Hampshire where they're currently paying about 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and that rate will go up year by year. We see electricity cost inflation of about 2.5% a year, so that their average cost, if they stick with the utility over the life of a solar electric system, would be 15 to 20 cents a kilowatt hour.
All right.
Whereas by going solar, together with the incentives, they can lock in a long-term cost of electricity of 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour. 2 or 3 cents versus 15 or 20 cents, enormous savings, literally millions of dollars that businesses are saving by going solar.
Yes, as all those costs scale up, right, those payback periods probably shrink. Right. So what do you see typically? Maybe let's start with just a residential payback period. I typically see between 7 and 10 years. Does that sound reasonable as a payback for a purchase system?
It's gotten even better than that.
Oh, great.
If you've got a good sunny exposure, a nice pitched roof, as low as 6 years.
Okay.
But we see a lot in the 6, 7, 8 year range. If, like my home, we didn't have a south face, it's a bit shaded, but we still knew we would save long term. We were committed to making that investment, so it's on a west face, and we're looking to add an east face since I got the electric car. Got to power that since we added to our load. In that case, it's closer to 10 years.
Okay.
But 10 years as compared to a 25-year warranty period for the panels, but they're frankly built to last for 40 years or more.
Right.
So you'll get that, you'll earn that money back multiple times over.
Yeah. One other sort of quick topic in the personal installation space. What have you seen locally here in New Hampshire as it relates to the property value? Right. So this can be sort of good news, bad news, right? In some cases, the argument can be made that it increases the property value. Some towns and municipalities agree with that, and so they come out and sort of assess the home higher, and so you have a little higher property tax. What's your view on sort of how that dynamic works in the purchase discussion?
So the good news there is it certainly does increase your property value. Our system is worth $20,000 or so. We were able to take 30% back through the tax credit, so it cost us close to $12,000. Prices have come down in the last few years since then. But it adds value to your property. But fortunately, Nashua and most communities in New Hampshire by now have passed exemptions whereby that additional property value is not added to your tax burden.
Okay.
As
So
a way
that's
of
a town by
encouraging-
town.
Town by town,
Okay.
but most have already done so. And then the good news is at the time that you sell your house, studies have been done in multiple states looking at the effect of having solar panels on your roof in terms of your sale price. And for the average home, it raises the sale price about $15,000, about 5%, which is more than it costs the average homeowner to go solar.
All right, so now we have the big question, right? All right, is now the time, right? So we have talked about those prices coming down, and as an economist or an analyst, you can sort of look at it and say, it looks like prices are coming down. Maybe I should wait. On the other hand, we can also get into this. The administration recently put a 30% tariff on imported solar panels, so that's going to distort the markets here in some interesting ways, probably. Sort of, what's your view on sort of the timing? Like, are prices going to continue to come down, and what do you think the impact of the tariff is going to be?
So as part of my day job, I spend every day looking at pricing, and I've been tracking it month by month, certainly from the time when we installed solar on our own roof. And we've got an interesting confluence of factors. The technology gets better and better. We just upgraded our primary modules, solar panels, from 305 watt panels to 320 watt panels, which have other innovations to capture even more of that electricity as the sun hits them. The technology continues to improve, and it will, although there are limits of physics, so we won't see the same rate of increase in panel efficiency as we've seen over the last decade, for instance. A critical factor we touched a little bit on is the incentives. After 2019, so one more year, the investment tax credit begins to step down from 30% to 26% and further down. And those are a big motivator for especially businesses looking to go solar. So when you put those factors together, even though this tariff that the administration introduced, which will have the unfortunate effect of killing a lot more jobs than it adds, because in the US there's about 250,000 solar industry jobs up and down the value chain, very few in manufacturing.
Right, so it may help our manufacturers, but the overall industry,
the net effect is likely to be much more negative, unfortunately. But even with that, that adds maybe 5% to the total system cost. But fortunately, we've been realizing those kinds of savings year after year. So if you're getting an electric bill every month, frankly, the sooner you can offset that bill with solar, the better off you'll be financially.
Okay. And so the impact on sort of our, part of that argument of, all right, this will help the domestic production, and maybe, we get charged up and sort of get that industry a shot in the arm. That doesn't seem.
We'd love to see that happen.
Yeah, what's wrong with that argument?
And we do spec some panels from the U.S. Unfortunately, from a value standpoint, they don't tend to be the best. Our customers choose the higher value modules from various countries like Singapore, China, Taiwan. Unfortunately, the projections are that might add some hundreds of jobs, but it might kill as many as 23,000 jobs. Right. My company, 200 employee owners, local guys and girls, electricians, installers, plumbers, designers, engineers, you name it. Those are the jobs that having good value modules enables. And they've enabled us as a country to rapidly scale up, and we hope to see a lot more of that.
Okay. Well, Dan, thank you very much. This is a great discussion and dialogue today. I hope everybody at home enjoyed our conversation today. There's certainly a lot to think about, from the economics, from the buying versus leasing discussion, sort of your own personal situation, sort of where your house sits and all of that. And if you have any questions, certainly encourage you to reach out to Revision Energy. And again, I'm Jason Haviland with Financially Fit. Have a nice day.
Saving and investing can be confusing and overwhelming. We're here to break through the noise, misinformation, and confusion with easy-to-understand concepts and tools that you can put into practice right away. Whether you're a novice investor or an old pro, join Jason as he explores different topics on investing and personal finance. From 401ks to better budgeting decisions, we'll cover it all. Our investment guidance will give you the comfort and security of knowing that you're on track to achieve your goals. It's time to rise above all of the distractions of daily life and take control of your financial future. Welcome to Financially Fit with your host, Jason Haviland.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.